When Nigel Cannings first came on the SKADI Podcast back in November, the clocks had just gone back and Nigel told us how this was his worst time of year due to suffering from seasonal affective disorder. Over the course of the very moving episode, Nigel also told us about his diagnosis with bipolar disorder and the impact that has had on his life and career. Now Nigel is back as the clocks go forward and the days are getting longer, to discuss how the world is shifting to living with COVID, exciting new compliance technology, and opens up even more about his condition. Welcome to Breakdown to the Boardroom Part II with Nigel Cannings and Nick Corry. We hope you enjoy this episode of the SKADI Podcast.
Hey Nigel, it's great to be back with you. And as we promised everyone, we were going to come back in the week when the hour went the other way, because you, I think, very brilliantly raised awareness for everyone about SADS, or Seasonal Adjustment Disorder, and the fact that when we last did this podcast, we were going into what was probably a problematic time change, not power change, time change. Talking about regime change, gosh, there's enough of that going on. As we sit here, you know, I can look out of the window. We've had the most gorgeous day, you know, bright sunshine. It's the start of the week. I have a magnolia in the garden that's in full bloom. Everything feels great. And is this what, you know, am I getting more of it, or is this feeling magnified for you this week of the year? How does it work for you?
Yeah, it starts a couple of weeks earlier when you begin to feel that longer day coming on. I think those days when you open your eyes in the morning, and sadly I do get up pretty early, and you open your eyes in the morning and there's a little bit of, you know, the hint of light coming in through the curtains, and I think that's the moment at which it really starts to feel real again, and I think there is that kind of almost a sense of kind of renewal and rebirth, but in a mental health sense at this point, because, you know, I used to think of, you know, maybe the whole point was that, you know, Christmas was shoved in the middle as a pagan festival for something to do in the middle of the dark bit, and it was all supposed to get better after that. But I was reflecting a couple of days ago that actually by the time you get to March, you've had 6 months of this. You know, it's not, you know, Christmas is not really the time, is it? It's just it's a way station on the way to it getting even worse. And so, yeah, absolutely. I would say that really around now, that kind of sense of a lifting, almost kind of an optimism, and a kind of looking forward to the future.
I mean, you're a pretty creative guy, right? You're in a creative industry. You're making products and so on. Does it affect your creativity, or is that, you know, not really part of it? It's just your mood levels, or do they feed into each other? How does it work?
Yeah, it drives my staff nuts, actually, this time of year, because what generally happens is I sit down and we'll kind of start talking about stuff, and there's like, oh yeah, and there's, you know, something else, and let's do this, and, you know, add various other things, and I think that's been exacerbated this year because we have actually had a few face-to-face meetings, and I do think that a combination of kind of getting creative people together at a creative time of year, you know, particularly for me, suddenly really starts to feed into that, and there is that sense of you know, wanting to get on with things, and I think that, you know, in many senses there must be a reason why it's the start of the tax year now, that, you know, you know, this is suddenly everyone's thinking about, right, okay, let's go off and do stuff. So yeah, definitely for me, this is when it's probably for me one of the most creative times of year. And that's good because it helps kind of set the tone for what we do, kind of really for the next 12 months after that.
Yeah, no, got it. And as you mentioned, you've been back seeing staff face to face, and so are the offices open for you guys, or you're still sort of?
Oh, it's a weird one.
What's the model?
Yeah, it's a weird one, that the office has been open all the way through the pandemic, but really only open in as a kind of mental health escape valve, if I'm honest, for people who have been stuck at home and would rather go and stare at a different set of four walls than the ones that surround them when they're kind of stuck in their home office. And we've had, you know, some people have been in quite a lot, have just gone in once or twice a week. Other people periodically. I have to say that I've not been in that much during the pandemic, but now all of a sudden I think I'm in 4 times this week. So today's the only day this week that I won't be going in. We're having an all hands meeting on Thursday. Probably ridiculous at the time when we got today I think is the highest recorded case level ever for COVID in this country, but it's, we're operating this double think at the moment. So yeah, we've had the offices open, and we did downsize the offices at the start of the pandemic. We came to the end of our lease, and we thought, well, no one really knows how long this is going to go on, so we downsized. But we are actually looking in the next few months possibly to move to a much bigger office space to reflect that kind of opening up again for those people who want to get together, and I think people have reacted really well to it. They, particularly the research guys, they love bouncing ideas off each other. They love talking to each other. So we're going to have to expand the space that we've made available to them.
And what do you think that, because obviously you guys are thinking almost of going back to, the size of office that you had, that kind of model. How is it affecting the technology that are people going back to a traditional way of working, or has the pandemic had some kind of indelible effect on some of the technology changes that we've made? And I'm meaning, particularly with response to some of the kind of stuff that Intelligent Voices, offers around the kind of the monitoring and so on. What are you getting a sense this early on what people are thinking about that and the effect that that's had, or has there been no effect?
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to go back to the traditional 9 to 5 working week. I mean, I really don't, and you don't need to be a genius or kind of futurologist to work that one out. I mean, it's people have realized that the technology required to allow people to work remotely has matured enormously and has been battle tested during the course of this pandemic. But it is going to cause irreparable harm to certain types of work and certain types of working. And because you cannot, and I really thought early on in all of this that you could do it. You could actually get away with having your entire team working remotely. And for us, everything worked really well. The systems worked really well. The interpersonal relationships seem to work really well. But I think that having re-experienced some of that element of face-to-face, you can see there was something missing. There was definitely something missing, that a human connection, that because I suppose you have to kind of step back and think, well, why is it that we've all been congregating in offices all these years? Really, I mean, there's for quite a long time. Even pre-computer, you could have. I used to, in my career as I think I was started off as a lawyer, and the most rapid means of communication we had was an envelope, which was an interdepartmental memo, which people used to send around the office, and you'd write someone's initials on it, and then it would move around the office, and then some genius invented the fax machine, and that was like amazing. But actually, I reckon that 95% of the time I could have started the week, I could have gone into an office, stuck a load of files in my briefcase, and done most of it at home. So there's probably, we've been working in offices because there's a supervisory thing. People want to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to. That's easily solved today. That you need to be able to communicate with people. Well, that's easily solved today. You need access to files and books. Well, that's even more easily solved than it was before. But yeah, I think that we are going to evolve into a hybrid model, which probably means that a lot of people will be spending like Thursday. I think one of the problems is that we've got all this office space, and what's going to happen is it's going to be the same amount of office space, but occupied only one day a week. and everyone's going to pick Thursday. It's just like, I mean, who the hell wants to go into the office on Monday and Friday? And so, and it's going to be a really interesting generational challenge, I think, because for people at our age and stage, we've done the office thing, we've done the commuting thing, and so in a sense we'll pick and choose it, and we're at that point where we can. And I think for us, a lot of it is going to be, well, actually, I find that meeting people face to face for an hour, 2, 3 hours allows me to get my job done more effectively. But do I need to spend all the time in the office? No. I think when you look at people from the younger generation, and this is one of the things which has troubled me all the way through the pandemic, because I've got children who are entering the workplace in their early 20s now, and they've really lost that kind of initial connection and that initial kind of building of interpersonal relationships and mentorship and all of those things that actually were really important about going into the office. And they've had isolation, and I've seen it in my own family with kind of people who've entered the workplace, have gone into jobs which haven't been particularly suitable for them, perhaps, and have suffered terribly as a result of it, because there's this awful sense of isolation, which I think that this type of communication magnifies. In the same way that, when we send emails to each other, I'm always really careful about what I put in emails, and I think really carefully about what would it sound like if someone read this to me cold, if I had no context to it. And I think that this type of video communication has the same issue. It's very easy to come off in a way that you really don't expect to do so. Whereas when you sit in a room with someone, you can talk, you can gauge the body language, you can, and also you're going to see that person afterwards. That's the other thing. If in the office situation, as soon as you click end on one of these Zoom calls, that person's disappeared. You're not going to bump into them 10 minutes later at the water cooler. I don't know what, do they still have water coolers? But that's or in the kitchen, and have a chat about something which might help deflect some of the things that you said, create a relationship. It's this type of communication is really brutal. And I think that for young people entering the workplace who don't have that experience there, that is causing issues. That is causing genuine mental health issues. And as I said, I've seen it in my own family with people entering the workplace who have felt very, very isolated. And it's very difficult to help someone in that situation. How do you, move them through? I mean, we've managed to do it, but I'm sure there are plenty of people for who haven't been so lucky and are feeling very trapped at the moment.
I mean, do you think, Nigel, it's a really interesting point you make, and an interesting observation. And I guess there's another sort of observation in there, in that in this in pandemic life, we have a kind of, the amplification on what you and I, look at in our careers is kind of really ramped up, i.e., I'm thinking about the indelible footprint of all of the communication methods that we've discussed, whether it's a Zoom like we're on now, whether it's an email, whether it's a chat message. All of that is indefinitely there, right? Whereas if you're face-to-face in an office, at least there's a moment, there's a conversation. There might be some euphoria, some anger, some conflict, but then it's gone. It goes away with time. Whereas all of the things we've talked about, and I'm in investigations, I'm looking at e-coms, chat rooms all the time, I'm listening to voice, it's there. I mean, I know there are sort of, I guess, statutory limitations on how long we hang on to data for, but also, it has a much longer footprint. Do you think that's a fair observation, or what do you think about that?
Well, very much so, and particularly in the industries that we work in, it's got worse. I mean, the retention obligations for audio and video data, which used to only be a year, here in the UK. MiFID II is pushing this out sort of 6-7 years now in terms of the ongoing storage of this. And what we back in the day, people used to pick the phone up. That was always the joke. If you wanted to say something that you didn't want recorded, quote unquote, you'd pick up the phone. And I think one of the things that people have discovered during the pandemic is that because there's an increasing paranoia, which has been, I think in a sense quite correctly fueled by the FSA about capturing electronic communications, the net's gone really wide. And I think we're seeing people who are being captured now who perhaps wouldn't previously have expected that to happen. And sometimes it's incidentally because they happen to join a call which is being recorded for regulatory purposes, or in fact, their employer has decided that they are the type of person who falls within that net. So you see people, tens or hundreds of thousands of people whose every action is being recorded, and now we're looking at video analysis technology to see, and the ostensible reason for that is to make sure that if I'm engaging in a contract discussion, I don't say we'll do it for 3 million. Then I hold up two fingers like that, show like saying don't worry, it's only 2. It's that the non-verbal communication, or even holding up messages like that, where you stuff that and so we're seeing this type of technology come in. So actually the surveillance around it is increasing, and actually even in our day-to-day lives, because companies have latched onto the fact that you can sell more things to people if you listen into telephone conversations and Zoom conversations and analyze buyers' reactions to things. There's been an explosion in people using recordings to try and determine how better to sell to the next person. And quite often you'll be on a video call and you'll have blah 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 recorder, and it's like, who the hell is that? Oh yeah, it's just we record this for training purposes. Yeah, training your algorithm purposes. That's what you're saving it for, not for anything else. So you're right that one of the things about a face-to-face meeting, one of the things about the casual encounter is, unless you're sitting in a police interview room, the chances of that being recorded for posterity are pretty low. And therefore you can take a summary of that meeting out of the meeting. Although I have to say, we've been approached a number of times during the course of the pandemic by people who are looking to introduce meeting capture technology because they've seen that the benefits of recording and analyzing online meetings are so high, and quite often for knowledge capture purposes. So a lot of this we're going beyond surveillance now. The kind of next gen idea is, how can I summarize what was said quickly? How can I do note taking really quickly? How can I record this stuff for posterity? And they're actually worried that they're going to lose that when they go back into a physical environment. So a lot of people we're seeing are saying, well, actually, we'd like to be able to capture these meetings. So I think that the scope of monitored communication, the scope of unmonitored communication is going to shrink quite significantly because of the benefits that people can see of capturing these types of communications. So I think there's going to come a point where we're all going to be huddling in the corridor, hoping that no one's got their phone on, which of course is listening all the time.
Well, that's an interesting one, which I'll come back to that one. But I'm just interested, Nigel, from a kind of a mental health point of view, if people have a sense that there is no escape from the monitoring, is there a risk there from a mental health point of view? Or is it going to be the case that actually everyone will just kind of get used to it, and that'll just be it, and they'll be part of the fabric, and people just kind of get on with it? What do you think?
I think, again, these things tend to be generational, because there's a whole generation of people now whose personal data has been sucked up and reused by Facebook and Google and all of the big guys, and no one says anything about it anymore. I mean, they really don't. If you think every single email that you send, if you use Gmail, is being used in some way, shape, or form to advertise back to you. You know, you look at your email and, gosh, that's surprising. I sent someone an email about fence posts the other day, and I'm getting an advert about fencing. How did that happen exactly? Well, you know, because you sacrificed all of your privacy and your freedom in exchange for free email and, you know, free social media. And, you know, these servers cost something to run, guys. You know, I mean, you've got to remember this. So I think that we have sacrificed an enormous amount of personal freedom in exchange for utility, really. And you know, you only have to think about walking around the streets of London. So the question that anyone would ask themselves is, do I feel happier knowing that there is a recording of my activity which will help a perpetrator of a crime be caught later on when I'm being mugged, or even in real time because someone's watching it? Do I feel happy with that? Or am I worried about that one drunken occasion where I slipped over and looked like an idiot? This is my much younger self I'm talking about, but you know, being recorded and played back on social media for posterity. And actually, that's another thing, because you know, everyone's videoing each other. I said these are generations of people who are literally going around videoing their every single move, and in fact volunteering to be videoed if you look at things like TikTok. So I think that it's only the old crusties like us who are going to be looking back saying, well, you know, I remember the days when you could actually do something stupid and get away with it, when you could say something stupid and get away with it. I think it's just something which people will come to accept over time. But it's always going to be because you're trading it off against something else. I think that's the thing, is, you know, for free email, or, you know, police being called at the right time, or whatever it might be. And the one thing that and you asked about the mental health aspect of that, and I think again what you've got is a sliding scale of problems, because if you sell it back to people properly, you can actually show them the advantages of that type of monitoring. So, you know, I walk around with a smartwatch on all the time, and it monitors my my pulse all the time, you know, however many heartbeats I get a day. And just once, I got a high heartbeat notification, and I was actually able to take a step back and think, why is this happening to me? I was in an intensely stressful situation at the time, and you know, and actually that helped. It helped me analyze that situation and look at it. So if we're wearing biometric devices which are capable of monitoring our health, then why not other things? Why not analyze someone's voice? Why not put ourselves in a situation where we can actually start to say to someone, you know, we're worried because over the last 3 months or so, your behaviors become erratic, your the stress levels in your voice are changing, even the way you look is changing. You know, you're washed out all the time, or whatever it might be. So I think that as long as you manage the trade-off properly, you can actually sell these things back to people, as long as they're getting genuine benefits out of it. And I want to live forever, Nick. You know, I'm very keen on this whole living forever thing. So, you know, if my computer is going to tell me that, you know, there's something wrong with me, I mean, just think about this. So I'm sitting here at the moment, and so I've got a 4K camera because I'm a technologist and I have to have a decent camera. But as over the next few years, we're going to see the resolution of webcams increase dramatically. And the reason for that is the pandemic, because we've all been sitting there using these generally quite shockingly bad webcam things, all squinting and thinking, oh, you know, can't really see them very well. And the same with microphone technology. I mean, the reason I wear a headset is because I do speech recognition, and I know that the best way to get it out. But for most people, it feels quite unnatural. So we'll see microphone technology, and the technology exists at the moment. It's just we don't really implement it, capturing the voice a lot better. So with my 4K camera, at some point in the next few years, if I were to develop a small kind of a small patch of skin on my face, say, or something which looked like a freckle, or just even something slightly rough, then my system, which of course at this point is not going to be locally, it's going to be in Logitech's cloud or somewhere, will be able to say, Nigel, we're slightly concerned about the fact that there's a lesion that has appeared on your body. I personally would be really pleased to think, tiny bit freaked out, but pleased to think that my health could be protected just by having a meeting with you, Nick. In fact, my health is I already feel better having a meeting with you see, so it works. My heart rate's gone down, all is well with the world. But yeah, I think that it's about selling the positive benefits of this technology to people, as well as, was recognizing that there are people who genuinely feel threatened by being monitored and tracked, and they don't all live in Montana. Yeah. There are people out here in the real world who feel a bit bad about this type of stuff, and it's going to be impossible to not be monitored. And I think that's something that we have to recognize, and that the fear and paranoia, you read these things about people who using keystroke logging technology just to make sure people are at their keyboards, who have been monitoring internet activity during the pandemic. How far do you go with that before it goes from being productive to just being downright intrusive and creepy?
Well, I'm really glad that you've said that the camera technology is going to improve, because I was really troubled. And I don't know if you remember this story. With about 6 months into the pandemic, there was reportedly a rise in people getting plastic surgery because they were really upset about the way their face looked on kind of Zoom and Skype and so on, and people were taking the drastic steps to get nose jobs done and so on and so forth. But apparently, because of the way, nothing more than the camera technology, obviously looking in the mirror never had this problem for them before.
Yeah, well, there is
change is not coming quick enough. I don't
know.
There's
a secret to that. Have a distracting background, and that way no one ever looks at your face. You see, that's the only reason I do it.
Well, you have an amazing background, and it's a very good quality one too, which I wouldn't, expect anything less from you, Nigel. So, I mean, we touched on it sort of at the start, but thinking about, the other optimistic thing that sort of coincided with now is we kind of got the all clear that we're kind of, we're coming out of the pandemic. We've got to live with COVID, and you've obviously observed that we, have the highest infection levels ever, but we continue to sort of peel everything back, and there is a more optimistic tone out there. How does something like the terrible events that are occurring in Ukraine, and that came so unexpectedly, how does that impact yourself? I'm just more of your sort of your mood, and do you feel anxiety about that, or how does it affect you?
Yeah, I do. I actually feel terrible anxiety as a result of it. I have to say, I don't know why, and I don't think it was just me. I felt very personally affected by it. I mean, I have Ukrainian friends. I have very good friends of mine who are married to Ukrainians. It felt very real. But actually, I think the thing for me, and I was trying to explain this to my my youngest daughter the other day, who's 18 now. I was trying to explain what it was like growing up in the 70s and 80s under the spectre of the bomb. And I can remember, I can't remember which was, I think it was Threads, and and just and the whole and then the government declassified all the Protect and Survive films, and it was just terrifying. I mean, I can remember, and I can remember reading obsessively about nuclear war at that point, and I had books on it, and learning all about the minutes to midnight, and it was living through that time in the late 70s and early 80s, when the more precarious the situation became in the Soviet Union, the closer we seemed to genuine annihilation, is a fear which has never left me. And I can still remember watching the Berlin Wall come down on TV and just thinking, well, that's one less thing to worry about. I could get hit by a bus, I could fall out of a window, but the chances of actually being annihilated in a nuclear conflict seem to have retreated. So yeah, I've kind of been carrying around this sense of, somewhere between unease and dread over the last few weeks. And so I was very active trying to help raise money, to donate money. We gave money as a company. We gave money personally, just kind of anything, because there's that feeling of uselessness. I think that's the other thing that a lot of people feel. It's like, I just feel I want to do something. I don't feel necessarily that my politicians are giving me what I want. Just a sense of anxiety and dread, and that at the moment I would say that kind of comes on in waves again. I'm an obsessive doom scroller. I mean, I really am. I don't want to be. I can't help myself, but I'm reading. I've people I know around Lviv, close working colleagues of mine. I've got friends who have got relatives still in Kiev, and you just it's not going to affect me personally unless Putin launches a nuclear attack. Hopefully, relatively unlikely. But it is having such an unbelievable effect on people who are in it. Yeah.
It's interesting what you say, because I'm of a similar generation to you, and I remember, you've mentioned Threads. I remember watching it at school, and then after it, kids in the class just crying for hours because of that fear, that dread, and that has absolutely evaporated from our lives, because that you just, as you say, once the Berlin Wall came down and essentially it was all kind of finished, there was a very big change, and I think we've enjoyed this kind of a huge peace dividend. You and I have gone for kind of, I mean, there've been wars, but not, that sort of that fear has gone for, I think, 30 years of our lives, and that's quite a sustained period. And then it has very much re-emerged in the last sort of month. I mean, I guess why I bring it up is thinking about bipolar and how outside influences can have a kind of destabilizing effect. I've had to sort of ask myself the question, whether am I imagining what is happening out here? Because what has occurred in the last couple of, or the last month, has been, quite resonant for the kind of feelings that my own brother, who has bipolar, when he goes manic, he feels very much like he is kind of driving world events, and and very much involved in them. And I've had a terrible fear with what's happened lately, because of that anxiety, that stress that you've talked about, coupled with this kind of big world event that could be a really big trigger for him.
Yeah.
And it's been really marked for me, because he had his last manic episode was effectively in the first month of the pandemic. That change in life just completely set him off. And it was also coming out of that, the first time that he actually accepted and acknowledged that he had an illness and needed to get care. And this sort of, with this event, I've been able to talk to him for the first time, Nigel, and say, I'm not worried about you, but I have been worried for you with what's happening. Do you understand? Do you know what I mean?
I do.
But actually, it's been a really brilliant thing, out of what happened at the start of the pandemic, and his realization that I've been able to talk to him about it, because as you and I discussed on the first episode, I think there was a kind of Rubicon moment for you where you kind of understood that you had a problem. And I think that's happened for him in the pandemic too. And that, I think, has been a really, good thing for our relationship. So I guess, what we were coming back to talk to about here was the sort of the optimism and the good stuff in mental health in this episode. And I guess I'm sort of what I'm asking you about is what are the kind of the positives do you think out of mental health for you? Because there must be some, or are there not?
Why is it good to be mad? Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. Well,
let me ask you this, Nigel.
Yeah.
Is bipolar part of you? Are you part of your identity? Or would you be content if someone said tomorrow, I can just take that away from you and you'll never have had it again, and actually all memory of it will be gone from you? Would you accept that deal? Or would that be a really difficult choice?
It would be a difficult choice because it's been so tightly wound into my life for so long. It would be impossible to say what would have been better and what would have been worse as a result of it. I mean, it taught me a lot about my family and my family relationships, and particularly my marriage, and how strong that is. And my honest answer is I would take it away, not because of me, but because of the impact it had on the people around me. So I think that there are and have been some positive elements to me very personally. So it is a disease which does tend to foster creativity. There may have been points in my life when that's been good, but actually I remember when I went to hospital, when I finally realized what was going on, I just said, give me everything, give me all the drugs, give me everything you can, because I just want to be normal. I just want to be like everyone else. And actually what I discovered was, as my doctor said to me at the time, something called normal for Nigel. Actually the person that came out of it is still creative, still, reasonably good fun to be around. Has the same issues as everyone else. He gets sad, he gets angry, he gets frustrated, he gets happy. The only difference is I worry about all of those things. I worry about being sad like other people because I'm concerned that maybe it's, I'm having a problem again. I'm worried about being really happy about things because I'm worried that maybe I'm hypomanic again. I'm worried about being super creative because sometimes I can be super creative because I think I'm really going into a manic phase, and maybe none of that's true. Actually, it's just me, but it's taught me a lot about myself. And so I said it would be, for me, it would be really difficult to know. And I remember seeing Stephen Fry talking about this when he was refusing to take medication because he said he felt that it would take away a part of him. I think he's changed his mind now on that because he, like me, has realized that all the medication he's doing is sloughing away the bad bits. But yeah, I think, and maybe this is a sign that actually I'm not symptomatic at all these days, is the fact that I would get rid of it for those people around me, because it's had a terrible impact on my family, my relationships, and makes me so worried because of the genetic element of it. I've probably been obsessing for years over the impact that it might be having on my own children, kind of obsessively looking out for signs which probably aren't there. And that can't be a good thing. So yeah, to answer the question in a single phrase, yeah, take it away.
Wow. Okay, but I'm interested there also because you say that there is a certain amount of living with, doubt and I guess fear, and we're talking about perspectives because you're wondering whether am I getting too sad? Is this something coming on, etc. How do you keep that perspective? How do you keep your perspective? Or is there someone else that helps you keep that perspective? Or they're people? I mean, how do you do it?
It used to be people. It used to be, so, going back to when we first spoke around the change of the year, and what would happen is I'd be insufferable for a week or so, and it was a very particular pattern. And my wife would just say to me, she said, "You're doing it again, Nigel." She said, "If you look at the date, have you seen what date it is?" It's like, oh God, yeah, it's then again, isn't it? So I now keep a sort of mental diary where I kind of, because of looking at the cyclical nature of it over the year now, I'm able to say, well, actually, in October, November time, it's particularly bad. I have to be careful about that. Mustn't put myself in situations where it could be triggered very easily. And then this time of year, I feel happier and more elated. And I know that that's because we're coming out of the worst of it. And the day's getting longer, it's sunny, it's great. And so I feel very uplifted as a result of it. So yeah, but it's, we're talking about 20 years now. So it's not something which has happened overnight. And I suppose when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, as we all do from time to time, feeling anxious, I'm able to take a step back and say, how many times have you done this before, Nigel? I think if there's anything that I'd ever recommend to anyone who suffers from mental health problems, it is, you have to have kind of a diary, either one that you write down or one that you keep in your head, which says, when was the last time I felt like this? Did I get through it? How did I cope with it? And I think the biggest question always is, did I get through it? Because that is actually it's the bleakness of those moments when you think, I've hit something which is so bad, I can't get past it. And my constant obsession when I think about particularly bipolar, and particularly in men, is suicide, because of it's the one thing you can't come back from, and yet is unfortunately so incredibly common. So I kind of do these, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but this kind of suicide health check sometimes. Really, I'm not, I am not and never have been suicidal, but I certainly, in the darkest days, it was one of those things that you kind of think about in a very, very abstract sort of way. It's very almost clinical type of way. It's like, it's not something I'm going to do to myself, but what would someone in my position do if they felt this way? And so I spend a lot of time thinking about, just making sure that I remember that the way I'm feeling now is the way I felt before, and this time before, and this time before. And the same at the other end of the scale as well, because, I can be frightened to be happy. I mean, I am often, in fact, frightened to be happy, because it worries me that maybe it's more than that kind of that euphoric feeling of just being happy without any strings is a feeling that I also associate with the times when I was hypomanic, and I was happy for all the wrong reasons. I had no right to be happy. My body was flooding me with happy hormones, but actually I should have been severely worried. So yeah, it's had a very long-term and profound effect on my own ability to judge my own emotions. So it does, as I said, for a long time, it required other people to do that for me, and having that support network, being able to actually talk to someone about it, that again is, if you can't talk to someone about it, if you can't admit how you feel, I mean, again, talking about your brother, Nick, the fact is, the biggest step, the most profound step, is that one where you say, yes, actually, there is a problem here. The first time you communicate that to another human being, and that other human being is a person who's capable of responding to it, because I did say it to people who didn't respond to it, that's even worse. You kind of tear your heart out and say, right, here it is, pumping, bleeding in my hands, and people are brushing you off, saying, pull yourself together, which happens. That very first time you have that connection is really is that first point. but you need to do it over and over and over and over again. And you need to have someone watching you and monitoring you and helping you. And I think support from friends, from family, is really important. And I was reading an article today about someone, who is trying to engender better mental health in their own organization, just talking about the still enormous difference about if you describe someone who has cancer and chemotherapy and goes into remission, and the enormous sympathy which comes with that, to someone who has had some form of serious mental health episode that people still they don't want to know about it. They don't, it's still dirty and taboo, and because there's no, they were being strange and weird and unpleasant, and that's somehow that almost like it was their fault. We still blame people. We blame people with mental health issues for their mental health issues. We do, and I don't know whether that's an innate thing or whether we've been conditioned to do it. I suspect it's probably a bit of both. We react. There's something about seeing someone who's in physical pain, which makes us feel sympathy. There's something about people who are in mental pain that we're all slightly revolted by. And even if you've suffered with it yourself, there's still that slight check beforehand to say, no, this is not their fault. This is not, they're not to blame for this. And then you have to be prepared to step up and help them with it and keep helping. I think that's the thing. You can't just help once. It's an over and over and over thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think optimistically that there is definitely a long way to go on that, but I think there's been a sea change, Nigel, on attitudes, which is a really, really good thing. But as you say, it's a long journey that we, as a society, have got to continue down. But that, I do think that change has happened and is happening in a big way. So that is only to the good. But
I hope
more to do.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right, Nick. I mean, clearly in the last couple of years, just having this type of discussion. I mean, the fact that I can speak openly about what's happened to me. Although I have to say, if I was 22, 23 years old at the beginning of my career, you and I would not be having this conversation. I would not feel empowered to stand up and say, here's the terrible things which have happened in my life. Here's the struggles I'm going through. I'm in a very strong position. I can do this. I have my own business. I'm, reasonably articulate, and I don't mind doing it. So the door is, and if you look, it's funny, if you look on LinkedIn, there's a lot of posts about people who are suffering from mental health problems, and I think often, probably because it's something of interest, LinkedIn have picked up and it gets reinforced. But they tend to be certain types of people at certain stages in their career who talk about it. People who are a bit more comfortable with it, often people who are a bit older, not actually often people who are in their 50s and 60s so much, but people in their, kind of late 30s and early 40s, who are willing to talk about it, or they'll be talking about someone else. You see the most awful things about people, my best friend committed suicide, and this is the struggles that they went through type of stories. And I think it's great that those things are highlighted. It's very, very, very challenging to read, but it is very important. But I suppose that it's so many people are supporting it in the abstract. I think that's the problem, is you have got very personal contact with the problem. You've seen it firsthand. And, if you see all these people, waving flags for mental health, it's great that you're speaking out. I said this on the last podcast. There's a whole bunch of people out there who would definitely not give me a job as a result of that. I've had some people who I admire and respect who have come to me and said, how pleased they were that you had me on the last podcast. How it's fantastic that someone is speaking up for this. And so thank you, Nick, because you've given me a platform to be able to talk about this as well. But how would so many individuals react if they were actually faced with it? That's the question I always ask myself. And I'm not sure that it's necessarily their fault. I just don't think that we're giving people the tools to cope with it. If you appeared in front of me with blood pouring down your arm, I'd know what to do about it. If you appeared in front of me in floods of tears, saying that you could see no future and your life was over, or these terrible things, the stress at work or whatever, probably now at this point I've got the tools to cope with that, at least to a degree. But 20 plus years ago, probably not. So I do think that whilst we are beginning to be more accepting of it, we all have a duty to try and learn and understand what we can do to help people in that situation. And again, it's one of the things I think that we were keen to emphasize in this podcast, is that it's acceptance is one thing, help is the next thing. What practical things can we do to help the people around us? How would I help my friend? How would I help my employee? And that, I think, is one of the key things. I mean, clearly, this is exactly what you've been doing, Nick. I mean, you've been providing that help, that comfort, that support to your brother to help him through this very difficult time. And you're checking up on him. You're asking him the questions. You're trying, and even better, you're trying to put yourself in his shoes and say, if I had some insight into how he was feeling, and I was looking out on the world, how would I feel under those circumstances? I'm, gauging his reactions to other things. And I think it's fantastic that you've been doing that. And I think we have to talk to people in that situation in a clear, calm way, not being patronizing about it, but just to be supportive, a matter of fact. And people, most people appreciate it, not everyone. There's no talking to people is not a universal panacea. Some people can be helped, some can't. But I think that what you have done there is a fantastic example of the type of practical help that we can give the people that we love, the people that surround us. And just that can be enough to make all the difference between someone whose life goes completely off the rails and someone who can slowly be brought back into the fold and, dare I say, be made normal. Because actually, at the end of the day, anyone who's been through any form of mental health crisis, it will come out the other end and say, I just want to be like everyone else. It's all I want, really. I just want to be normal like everyone else. I want to have the normal day-to-day stresses that everyone has. I don't want to feel the way that I felt. And I've always thought that, we do that by trying to draw on our own experiences, by trying to put ourselves in that situation to think, if I were where you are, and mental health problems come in all different shapes and forms. It's organic, something like bipolar. It's driven by situation. It's by losing jobs. Grief is clearly one of the most common ones, and we have a shockingly few grief counsellors available in this country, who you don't have to pay a lot of money for. And I was able to work with a friend of mine and who suffered a very, very terrible personal loss in her 50s, and to help her find access to the right person to talk to. But it's just about thinking like that. It's offering practical advice and being ready for someone to slap you in the face and tell you to go away. I think that that's the most important thing is be prepared to be rejected.
Yeah.
People don't like being told what to do.
Yeah, and they're hurting, Nigel, and I think that's what people overlook, and I think what you're talking about, ultimately is acceptance and understanding, and I think if you can find or try to find those two things, you'll go a long way to helping people. I really want to thank you. I think you've been brilliant. Again, open, talking to everyone and sharing your experiences, and I hope together. We have brought some kind of acceptance and understanding for people away from the podcast. So thanks very, very much for talking to us. It's been great to have you back.
Well, Nick, again, thank you very much for having me on. And again, if there's anyone out there who is suffering, who is in pain, I'm easily reachable. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just some bloke who's got bipolar and has coped with it. But I'm happy to offer what little help I can. And I think, to repeat the other thing that I said on the other podcast, is if you really are seriously in pain, if you're thinking of ending it, and there are people who will be at one point, phone the Samaritans. That's what they're there for. They're magnificent people who only exist to help people who, and they can be helped. There's no person out there who cannot be helped, who cannot get through the crisis that they're going through. So as I said, Nick, thank you for giving me a platform just to talk a little bit about what I've been through. And let's hope if it helps one person, then it was worth it. So thanks again. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the SKADI Podcast. If you or someone you know has been affected by the issues covered in this episode, or you would like an improved understanding of mental health, please visit mind.org.uk. If you find yourself or someone you know in urgent crisis, please find immediate support at samaritans.org. Above all, we hope this episode can help start open and frank conversations in the workplace and continue to break down the stigma that still surrounds mental health.